home for now. We got lucky against Slovakia and we just about beat them. No thanks to Gareth Southgate, who's part of the reason that the Western world is going down. Joe Biden, Rishi Sunak and Gareth Southgate. What's going on with my voice? I was screaming at the match. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the Labour Party, Keir Starmer's plans. A very specific type of policy that's got part of the Labour manifesto that are genuinely socialist policies are going to be facing problems thanks to the European Court of Human Rights. Let's get on with the show. Oh, Keir Starmer, he's got all these long-term and short-term plans to nationalise things, to raise taxes, not for now, but also, obviously, when it comes to VAT and private schools. The original plan was to abolish the private schools, as if that's a good idea. The European judges said, well, no, we're going to stop it. This is the thing about the European Union and the European project in general. They are extremely liberal, which means that they are liberal globalists, which means that they would be against the policies and ideas that would empower nationalism, sovereignty and conservatism, but they're also against policies that are actually socialist as well, because they want a liberal globalist competition, as they call it, which is basically a new version of saying we have a monopoly, but we don't actually admit that we do. The European Union would stop other countries to do socialism because they want themselves to do centralization from Brussels. The idea that Keir Starmer and Angela Rayner had to abolish the private schools was already going to be a problem, but now they want to increase taxes on private schools, independent schools. And the way they did this, the way they got the support was they told the country, especially with left-leaning people, that all private schools are like Eton or Westminster or Winchester. Like, you have, like, they're all basically posh boys, they're all bad. But actually most ordinary independent schools in normal areas, they're not like Eton anyway. And, there's a lot of families of plumbers and all the other normal people, black cab drivers who save up to send their children to their specific normal independent schools because their state schools in the area is not good. But now they won't be able to do that. The European Court of Human Rights will be able to stop this because it goes against some of the core principles. They got 17, 18 principles that they use to interpret nonsense. So they say that the person who is in favor of ECHR, Keir Starmer, is going to be blocked by ECHR. Now, Lord Panic, who has they've been dealing with the European Court of Human Rights, said it would be strongly arguable that for a new government to impose VAT on independent schools would breach the right to education. That is because all other educational services will remain exempt from VAT, and the charging of VAT on independent schools alone is designed to impede private education and will have that effect. So that's kind of funny, the backlash on Angela Rayner and Keir Starmer on the core socialist policies of this manifesto. They went around, told the country that we're not really socialist anymore, but of course, we've already in the recent past on Tousi TV pointed out at least 5 actual socialist policies inside this manifesto. Anyway, when you look at the fee increases on the obviously education establishments and the independent schools, again, as I said, a lot of ordinary middle-class families will no longer be able to afford these costs. You can see the kind of slightly pink and more red one, that's the boarding fees, and the red one is day fees, obviously for day schools. The black line that you can see, that's the introduction of the 20% tax on them, extra obviously on top of the fee, and the difference in cost if the 20% was increased. It's absolutely insane. The cost was already going up anyway because of the cost of living crisis and inflation. Now it's just going to get worse and worse. The policy to abolish the private schools by Labour was eventually shut down by senior lawyers who argued that it could be at odds with the ECHR and spoke specifically about the risk of imposing VAT. So this means that this Labour government will no longer have any sort of honeymoon period like Tony Blair in 1997, because they're going to be clashing with the European lawyers and judges, but they're also going to be clashing with the far left MPs that they have, the Labour Party will have inside Parliament. And at the same time, they have to keep everybody happy, which means None of the policies are going to work. And by Christmas, probably, they're going to have rebellion from left-wing MPs against certain policies. They're going to have ECHR and other institutions blocking other policies. So basically, just like the Tory government, nothing is going to get done. There's not going to be much difference between the Labour government and the Tory government. Now, there will be fundamental differences. For example, bringing the voting age to 16 for children to vote. Yeah, these are fundamental changes, constitutional changes. And I wish that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party would have said, we would do some sort of referendum, because it's a constitutional change. You can't just randomly change the constitution. What are you, Tony Blair? Because that's exactly what Blair did. And we are now in this mess because he did all the policies changing the constitution without getting the public consent. Now, all that aside, Lord Leicester, who's also been dealing with ECHR, wrote in the Times in 2019 that in 1982, Lord Panic, that we talked about earlier, and I advised the school governing bodies that Labour's plan would violate the European Convention on Human Rights and its first protocol. Our opinion was published, no one disputed our advice, and the policy was dropped. This was when in the 1980s, Michael Foot and the rest of the Labour leadership were going to go full-on communist with certain policies. All these are going to be making things so hard for Keir Starmer's Labour government that, as I said, they're going to lose the support of the country. Because they don't really have the full support of the country, because the majority of the people who are voting Labour are simply voting against the Tories, and they're not ready to vote Reform or Lib Dem or whatever. There is no love for Keir Starmer. And there's this other reason, because everybody's voice needs to be heard. And in defense of the socialists in this country and social democrats, they are going to be disappointed as well, because Keir Starmer is not going to be able to do actual socialism. So I don't really blame the socialists who go around complaining that the mainstream parties, including the Labour Party, are also not really doing socialism. Of course, they are right, but they are doing socialism through the back door anyway. So if I were a socialist, I would still be relatively pleased that they were going to have Keir Starmer as Prime Minister rather than a more liberal globalist, again, another liberal globalist like Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt. As I said, there's not much difference in terms of the fundamentals between Rishi and Keir, apart from constitutional stuff. But Keir Starmer is going to be facing more problems, because when he's not able to implement socialist policies, his socialist MPs are going to be attacking him. And they might even come up with a plan to replace him with someone like Angela Rayner. How likely it is, we're not sure right now, obviously. Super chat from Lily Gal saying, yes, this is about Isabel Oakeshott. So after this video, we're going to bring you guys the latest update from Reform UK's exposés of Tory central office, because the Tory party have been plotting, dirty plot against a number of Reform UK candidates and a number of plants. They planted fake people inside Reform. We're going to be talking about that. Thank you, Lily Gal, for the reminder. We have Jonathan saying, don't why your channel appeared in my feed. Let's just ban private education. Far left have been purged by Kid Starver. Vote Green. So obviously this person is socialist leaning, because obviously vote Green. The whole point of policies and politics in general, you can't judge, and you shouldn't judge policies or programs based on intention. You have to judge them based on outcome. You know, for example, I can go out there and say, I'm against homelessness, I want to abolish homelessness. Or I'm against poverty, I'm going to abolish poverty. Or I'm against the illness, I want to abolish illnesses, right? That's intent. That's irrelevant. You have to come up with the actual workable policies. So when you say ban private education, as I said, not all private schools are like the posh ones like Eton or Westminster. In normal areas, a lot of independent schools, you still have to pay, but firstly, they're still expensive, but they're not as expensive as Eton, for example. So you have families of black cab drivers and plumbers and a lot of people who work hard to send their kids to those specific independent schools, because the other state schools in the area are not good enough. But let's just say private education is bad. If you abolish all the private schools, independent schools, you're going to have to somehow find space in the current state schools. There's going to be a massive burden on them. So judge policies based on its outcome, not based on its intention. And of course, that means taxpayers have to now pay more to either build more state schools or increase the sizes of classes, which doesn't really help because you need to aspire to have smaller classroom sizes rather than larger classroom sizes. That's one of the main problems of state schools anyway. But if you abolish private schools, of course, that's not going to help anybody. It's the same thing with private healthcare as well, because those who are paying to use the private healthcare, if you then ban it, then firstly, they're going to be a burden on the NHS. And these are the people who can afford private healthcare. You know, they have the money, but you're telling them they have to use the NHS. So other people who can't afford healthcare, who you have to use the NHS, they're going to have to wait in the queue longer because the rich people are now using the NHS. It just creates a bigger problem anyway. And basically, the poorer people in society have to pay more taxes so that rich people use free or non-feeing schools and, of course, the NHS. Why should it be the job of the poor people and the working classes to pay for rich people using services? It's not right. It doesn't work. And the same system was used in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Since 1979, the regime is an Islamic socialist regime. And they nationalized so many things, including the main two football clubs in Iran, and more than obviously two, but the main two, as well as the other football clubs, were nationalized. They nationalized football clubs. It's owned by the government. The country is completely crazy. And they did the same thing with a number of other areas, and it doesn't really work. Let's see there any other reaction. Hans Archive says, you support it, you vote for it. You get it, you deserve it. You go to the communists, oh, I meant socialist future Britain, it must be very boring for you to live under market economy. If you vote Labour, don't be surprised if you get socialism, of course. We got people from grammar school, the defenders of grammar schools, of course. Problem is that we didn't really empower grammar schools anymore since the 90s and 2000s onwards. If you are going to, but someone like Corbyn in vote, I think that says vote, in power, there must be something fishy going on with Labour. There's always something fishy going on with Labour. Kim says a friend paid into private healthcare, then when it came for her to have an operation, she went to the NHS. Why? Well, that just, again, puts more burden on the NHS, so that those who can't afford healthcare, they're going to have to wait in the queue because this friend who can afford private healthcare didn't do it. Dylan says, I'm bored and curious, if you had your own political party, what would you call it? The far right party? Bun party, let's do it. No, I mean, I don't do party politics. I don't really want to get involved with party politics anyway. That's not my job, but I don't know, I'll come up with a name later. Tony says, you have a lot of service men and women send their kids to private schools, so they have a stable schooling but putting it up. They cannot put in overtime. But that's also a very good point. There's so many people who, and this is kind of funny because a lot of them are middle class, ordinary middle class, not upper middle class, normal middle class people who, for example, voted for Tony Blair. And now they're sending their kids to these independent schools, and now they're furious when it comes to Labour. Like, what were you expecting? It's the Labour Party. You can't trust them. I know we don't trust the Tories, but the thing is that the Tories' problem is lack of action. The Conservatives, 14 years, at least the last almost 10 years, definitely 9 years, we had a situation where the reason the country is in a mess, or politics is in a mess, because the Tory party don't get things done. That's their problem. You know, they talk a lot, but they don't do anything, right? Now, there are obviously specific stuff that they've actually done, which is bad, but I'm talking about overall management of the country. The problem with the Tories is that they just didn't get things done, despite promises. The problem with Labour is that they will say bad things and they will get them done. So you're gonna have this parliament creating laws more than any other parliament on a regular basis. And who's going to hold them to account? Well, Ed Davey and the Liberal Democrats are going to be the opposition. So a left-wing government and a left-wing opposition, I don't think this is healthy for the House of Commons. And of course, I don't think it's going to be sustainable. What we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break because we have to come back in about 15 minutes or so. Don't go anywhere. We're going to do another live stream because we are just getting the latest information from France, breaking news and Marine Le Pen's upcoming victory against Emmanuel Macron's party. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Tousi, and we are the media.